Welcome to the GSB.
Thank you for having me here.
Really excited to have you here today as our first guest for Global Speaker Series. So as Mariel mentioned in the introduction, you have had an incredible career internationally. And over the next 40 minutes, we'll love to talk about your personal journey, both as an entrepreneur as well as an investor. And we'll love to hear your thoughts on the huge and exciting market in China today. We'll also open up the last 20 minutes for questions from the audience.
Sure.
So to get us started, so Neil, you grew up in China, and in 1989, you came to the U.S. initially for a PhD program in math, and you made the decision to do an MBA a year after that. Very validating for all the MBAs here to hear.
So at that time, we called it MPPM. I was telling people that this is like MBA, and oftentimes need a lot of explanations.
Definitely. And you chose to go into banking straight after your MBA. So I'm going to take us to the year 1999. At this point, you've been in banking for 8 years. You're running China capital markets for Deutsche Bank, and you're doing really well in your career. But at this point, you choose to make two pretty big decisions. One, you leave banking to start your own business, and two, you decided to move back to China. Tell us more about your thoughts behind that decision.
I think I can talk a little bit sort of the thoughts prior to my decision to go back to China start C-trip. I think, as someone who left China after 4 years of college, you always want to do something for China or around China. Obviously, upon graduation from Jiao Tong, probably the best choice for me at the time is, go to U.S. and study. But while I was in New York, I always thinking, can I do something? Can I leverage my China experience or background? 1992, 1994, there is an opportunity that you can go back to China and be part of the so-called capital markets efforts, right? Many students who study in the U.S. or work in the U.S. before end up joining those, Asian branch of, a big investment bank, and I'm part of them. And you get very excited because when you go back, you see how much China has been changed from the 1980s, against the time when I left China. So you really feel like, there are a lot of things you can do. But back in 1994, 95, most of the so-called economic reform are around big enterprises, especially SOEs. What really actually have changed is toward the end of 1990, the 1990s, when private enterprises come to become one of the major force in the whole economic development. And so people like myself, when I first working in the investment banking world in China, my major customers are the Chinese corporates. I'm the first one knock at door at the CNOOC at the Bank of China, and then you're starting to find that there are opportunity to do financings for private companies. And because of that, you're thinking about whether you can be part of them. At that time, entrepreneurship was not a popular word. And people like myself would say, probably I don't have much opportunity, to do that because you need a lot of, very large amount of capital. I mean, the first batch of Chinese, private enterprises typically are in the area like, manufacturing, transfer from the Shangzhen 企业, the so-called, those county enterprises before, or the real estate developers, who make the first sort of, their goal, and then, venture into other areas. But for people like myself who has not, do not have a lot of capital, there's not much, really I can do until internet come to play. And I have to thank, U.S. for giving me the inspiration. I came to Silicon Valley very oftenly because I have a lot of classmates working in different tech firms here. From 1998 all the way to 2000, each time when I came, I noticed the big changes because many of those who work at Oracle, SAP, IBM, before, has switched to internet jobs. And when I'm walking through, all those, drive-through, on 101, you see the big billboard change from advertisement from big companies to internet companies. So you see the internet is really changing how people live and work here in U.S. And naturally, you will think, well, if this is going to be the case in U.S., it should happen in China. So I have to say the first batch of internet entrepreneur in China, whether it's Baidu or Tencent or Ctrip, all get inspired because these successful models in the U.S. And we know we can do similarly like our U.S. counterparts. Basically, not a lot of capital yourself, but you can use venture capital to help you, to grow your business. So, my first venture, Ctrip, is exactly follow that, route. Expedia was doing very good, and we think, well, if Expedia could change the travel industry so much in U.S., why not in China? So that's how I started, Ctrip in 1999. Frankly, it's a very difficult decision. If I'm a, software, engineer, it's probably a natural extension of my previous professions. But I was a banker, right? A banker provides advice to the corporates and on merger acquisitions, debt financings, IPOs, and I changed my role completely to something very, very new to me, right? And it was a very big venture for me. And the only thing I'm comfortable is that I know if I'm not successful, I can always go back. Because if Deutsche Bank do not hire me, there's someone else going to hire me. Look back is actually not very good, mentality, because when you do entrepreneurship, you better be so determined that you will make it successful, not just to hoping that one day you're going to go back. You should not leave yourself any other possibilities. But that's how I started. I do know I have possibilities. If I can be successful, and I clearly understand there's a good chance that I might not, I can go back and maybe another bank can hire me. But when I really get involved with a startup, you don't have time to think about anything because you want to survive and you want to do well. And every day you are just so heavily engaged with your, surviving, efforts. Indeed, I would say in the first 2 years, you try to find your business model and you work day and night. You don't have time even to think about where's my, other alternatives. You don't. Yeah. I actually just tell you guys, a little story. When I resigned from Deutsche Bank, my boss, the head of Asia capital market, said, "Neil, you should stay 4 more months." I said, "Why 4 more months?" Because Euro is just created, around that time, and the Euro was introduced as a major currency. I was a fixed income banker, and I have been covered Ministry of Finance of China for many years, and Ministry of Finance has a plan to go to Europe to actually launch its first Eurobond. So my boss told me, "Look, you have been covered accounts for so many years. It's your pride to actually launch a Eurobond for Ministry of Finance, and this is your country. You'll be so proud of doing that. Just wait for 4 months." And I checked with my partners, and they said, "Neil, you can't wait for 4 months. Entrepreneurship is about speed. Another 4 months, you don't know what's going to happen." So I decided to quit in November, December, instead of wait until the spring in 2000. Interestingly, I never regret that decision because that Eurobond was not launched until year 2003. Euro was not doing well, as you guys all know, right? And the Euro coming down, and the Ministry of Finance said, no, I don't want to do it. So they wait until 2003 to actually launch the Eurobond. So I go back to tell my boss, later become an independent director of Ctrip. I said, "Look, if I wait for 4 months, I'm going to wait for another 10 months, and maybe 2 years, and there'll never be a Ctrip." So if you like to do something, and if you really feel like, there's something calling you inside, you better do it right away. And that's all about entrepreneurship.
So while you said that, you could always go back to banking if you weren't doing well, or you were doing very well with Ctrip, you started in 1999, and just 4 years, before the Eurobond was launched, you brought it public, listed on NASDAQ. And what's amazing is that's not even the only company you founded successfully in that period. In 2002, you founded Home Inns, now one of the largest hotel chains in China. You're in more than 300 cities, close to 3,000 hotel chains, and also 4 years listed on NASDAQ. How do you do it? What do you think has contributed to your success as an entrepreneur?
I think it's very importantly that once you get into the business, you are able to really understand that sector very well instead of just looking at your own business and say, I'm doing my daily execution. So at a C-Trip, it's really a very eye-open opportunity for me for the whole hospitality industry. You realize, the Chinese travel agencies are so backward in terms of the IT systems. And there's so much middleman involved in bringing a customer, whether it's business or leisure, to the ultimate destinations. There's so much you can do. Obviously, as a company, you can't just run just one issue, but you do, get to know a lot about the whole, industry. One thing which we noticed when I working at a C-Trip is our upstream, so-called, the hotel industry itself is very, very underdeveloped. For example, there's many so-called, business hotel or economic hotel chains in the U.S. But in China, back in 2002 and 2003, there's almost none. It actually shocks me that there's no such hotel which catering to a specific needs. And when we launched Home Inns, initially I was a little bit concerned how big a company could be, because each hotel is small, 100 rooms, 150 rooms, and how big a company this could become, or whether China is ready. But again, I got inspiration from U.S. I remember I was in Dallas visiting a few travel service company, because that was the hub of many U.S. Travel service companies. And I arrived at the airport. I rented a car, drive from the airport all the way to downtown. It was like nighttime, around 9 p.m., whatever. And during that 20 to 30 minutes drive, I observed there's about 15 names, different names of budget hotels or economy hotel chain, from Red Roof all the way to Motel 6, whatever. And the total number of hotels I counted around 25. So from Dallas, from suburban airport to the city, you can have 25 hotels. So I say, well, market size is not a problem for China now. But indeed, I never imagined we can have 3,000 hotels in China, by Home Inns. And this is all created by our efforts, and as well as obviously many of our competitors. And the market is definitely there because the demand is so big, and we just need to create good product to cater to the users.
So you made quite a few transitions, going from a PhD to an MBA, and then banking to entrepreneurship. In 2005, you make yet another big decision, going from being an entrepreneur to becoming the entrepreneur behind entrepreneurs. And what's really interesting is you could have chosen to start your own fund, which I'm sure you had plenty of resources to do. But instead, you decided to be a franchise firm with Sequoia Capital, this really well-established American brand. What were some of these considerations behind bringing this global brand to China?
Well, I think, first of all, if you look at my career from PhD program, I never get a PhD, to MBAs, or not MBA, MPPMs, and to banking, etc. I don't think we have many choice back then, and this is something which you guys, compare with us. You guys are so lucky. I'm talking about, especially those probably students from China, because when I arrive in New York, I don't think I can get into business school right away. And again, after business school, you don't have many choices either. And oftentimes, you're never going through internship or prior working experience, so it can tell you what's your best fit for you. But what actually drives me to make those choices is that you see the great opportunity, and also you go with the whole trend. And the last 20, 30 years, the big trend is that you think that China is going to become, a global economy, a powerhouse. And if you believe in that, and in a poker term, you call it, if you are all in China, you are largely doing well. And I guess that's probably going to be the case for the next 10, 20 years. If you, so-called 看多, or if you be long China, or even more so, you are, all in China, you're likely to do well. And coming back to doing, venture capital, I always think that probably the best fit for me after spending 7 years as a banker and then another 6 years as an entrepreneur is getting to an investment field, because you can leverage your experience both as a financier as well as an entrepreneur. So that's something which I think probably fit me very well. Clearly, I never planned that. I never get into the bank and say, hey, one day I do some entrepreneurship and then I can best fit myself as a venture capitalist. I never do that. Same when I started C-Trip, I always want to survive and make C-Trip a great company. Never think that, okay, this experience can position myself, be a good venture capitalist, sometime down the road. Now, I can do a fund myself. Indeed, I make some personal investment while at C-Trip, and some of those are very successful, like Focus Media, eHouse. But I was thinking how I can sort of best leverage my experience, at the same time can really make an investment and have a big impact on the whole, so-called new economy. You can set up, a fund myself, but I think it's going to be grow probably not as fast compared with setting up something with Sequoia. And also, I feel like I really want to learn from what a firm like Sequoia has been, accumulated in the last 40 years. In Silicon Valley, there's many firms has been active in the investment space, but Sequoia has been obviously they are the longest and still probably the best, or if not or I would say at least one of the best. So I was very intrigued how they can do that, one generation after another. So to me, to raise money to make investment is probably not the most difficult thing, but the most sort of challenging thing is how to make a sustainable business. To me, I think Sequoia China is just another venture. If you want to make one or two good investment, that's an easy job. But how you can build a team and how to make a sustainable business, just like what I did at C-Trip, I think that's a very, very different thing. And today, look back after 10 years, I'm very happy the choice I made, because at our 10-year anniversary, we have a long list of entrepreneurs which become Sequoia portfolio CEOs. But more importantly, from 10 years ago, a 3-person, 4-person team, today we have 12 partners, and we have covered some of the most important sectors in China and become investor in many of the leading companies. And that's something which probably difficult to achieve just with one man's efforts or with Nielsen brands.
So on that topic, Sequoia Capital in China for the last 10 years has a phenomenal track record. You've pretty much put money in all of China's biggest unicorns, Alibaba, JD.com, VIP Shop. People call you China's Midas. You turn stone into gold. What do you think makes you so successful as an investor, especially in China? What's your secret sauce?
Well, I think this venture capital investment is a profession always has regret, clearly we have a lot of very successful companies, but obviously we also have a lot of regrets and frankly, mistakes. And the good thing is you learn from your mistakes, and then you try to improve every year. The other thing very, very important is when you look at the Sequoia, U.S., they have 40-year history. They have a long list of success. Oracle, Cisco, Apple, and then Google, and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the reasons behind that is they're able to capture all the major trends, and they are able to say no to some trend which turn out to be just pure illusions. And that's, I think, is the probably most important factors behind the success of firms like Sequoia. And same for us in China. If there's any so-called success for us, then that's I think we have been really taking the major trend right. I remember back 7 years ago, we have decided that we should spend enough time and put enough of investment into e-commerce area. We do have a view that e-commerce will become very, very important in China, probably even more important compared with the retail space in the U.S. So we invest probably around 15 e-commerce companies in China. Some of those are not successful, but we did capture the top 5 to 6 very successful e-commerce in China. Same for O2O. Offline to online is not a big space in the U.S., but it was a big space, and it continued to be a very important space for China. We think this is a very important area for us, and we did a lot of research back 4 or 5 years ago. We invest probably around, again, 12 to 15 companies, and we happen to capture the very top 4 companies, from Meituan to Dianping to Ele.me to Dada. And that's the way I think, I think probably, good firms should make investment. You actually have a view on the market, and hopefully a little bit earlier than, most other people, and you put big emphasis on the sectors and making multiple investment in that, in that sectors. And this is the same for, U.S. If you look at Sequoia, back in 40 years ago, they pay big attention to, semiconductors. And then semiconductor, leads to personal computer. And they, again, invest multiple companies in personal computer. And then to and then to software companies. And then when internet, become the major scene, they invest multiple internet companies. And then go into, mobile internet. That is the way I think, a good investor should follow. There's nothing, magic about it. There's always something which you will miss, because of judgment on person, or judgment on a particular business model. But that's okay. You always will make mistake. But as long as you capture all the major trends, you'll be doing very, very fine. And sometimes it will including to say no to some sectors. I remember 7, 8 years ago, clean tech is a buzzword, both here in the U.S. as well as in China. And luckily, our U.S. partners as well as our China partners decided this is not a big area. Fundamentally, it's not easy to creating large market caps by investing venture capital or even private equities into the sectors. Indeed, after 10 years, anyone can remember what are the top multi-billion-dollar company out of the space? Nothing, right? And avoid those sort of pitfalls is, again, very, very important, because there are certain firms spend 1/3 of their time and money into the space, and they end up finding this is actually not much there. And this is and I think this is probably the most important efforts and judgmental calls. Coming down to companies, you always will make mistake. I remember when we look at the video space back 9 years ago. We actually like the space, and we actually put a lot of efforts on it. And U.S. Sequoia has invested in YouTube, very successful. We picked the number 3 player in that space, and end up it's just a small game for us. And these things will happen all the time because you may not be do all right for judging a particular entrepreneur. In that particular case, the company's founder was not very good at the marketing, and happened to be that the marketing is the key efforts for a video sharing companies. And sometimes you get lucky, like in our case, VIP Shop or JD, or recent case like a Meituan Dianping. But the big trend is a lot more important to calling right on one particular company.
So what do you think are some of these major trends going forward? What excites you about China today?
I think, every couple of years, there's always some technology breakthroughs. And the last 5 years in the US, the big theme is big data, SaaS enterprises. And it's not a big thing in China yet, but I think it's becoming increasingly important. In fact, I would think, the returnees from this part of the world, especially from Silicon Valley, might have a bigger role to play in China if you talk about big data and SaaS and enterprises. China, in this time, is like US 5-6 years ago, when you come down to enterprises, softwares, SaaS enterprises, SaaS and big data. So I think this is actually a great opportunity. And just like when 1999, there's many big internet company US being founded. China, there's very few areas has been covered, and this is very much comparable. And when you come down to for the returnees to go back to a founding company, I think this is actually a very good area, because if you talk about consumer internet, you may not able to compete successfully against so-called the local guy, because in the consumer internet space, the cultural factor is so heavy. You have to understand your user very well. If you work in the US for too long, you may not be able to do that. If you look at like Charles Zhang, and if you look at Robin Li, when they go back to China, they don't really have a very long working experience here in the US. They are not like an early employee of Yahoo or early employee of Google to go back to founding Chinese companies. But in the enterprises area, the technology component is more important. So people who work here for many years in that space could actually play a very important role in shaping up the space in China. So I think this is definitely a very important area. The other important area is so-called robotics or artificial AI areas. Again, in that area, there are many U.S. companies ahead of China, but China started to see some local born companies which had developing its own technology. Company like DJI, right? Definitely the number 1 player in the drone space. And so I think we probably see some interesting dynamics. Even some of the Chinese company will doing better than some of the U.S. company addressing those major trends. But just like what we've seen before, every couple of years there's new technology breakthrough and bringing new commercial opportunity. But relatively speaking, I think China's opportunity might be bigger compared with the U.S. because the so-called the efficiency in the traditional industry is well behind compared with U.S. That's why e-commerce could do so well in China compared with the U.S. and same for O2Os. Yeah.
So while we're on the topic of American companies in China, China is a huge market, growing, second largest economy in the world. And Sequoia China has actually also been working with a lot of these American companies. You've invested in LinkedIn. You're a strategic partner with Airbnb. So for you, what do you think are some of the biggest opportunities and especially challenges for American companies entering China? And what's Sequoia's role in helping them navigate this?
If you're looking at global companies, especially U.S. company coming to China, I think in the first 30 years, 40 years, when China opened door, many U.S. companies has been very successful because the technology is just so advanced that when they come to China, there's no competitions. Like when GM come to China, people love it, even though GM may not be the best mobile automobile company in the world, right? And there's a lot of joint venture get set up. So at that time, the key word in the joint venture is use technology to gain market share, right? 用技术换市场. So whether it's European players or American players, oftentimes set up their own subsidiaries or set up a joint venture in China, and they could do very well against the competition, either against the private company or against the state-owned enterprises. But things have been really changed. Many sectors today, the private companies in China and state-owned enterprises in China are very competitive. They have learned. They have developed in their own R&D, and they can really compete very effectively with you, right? When P&G goes to China, when GM goes to China back 30 years ago, they dominate certain space. Today, they have to compete fiercely with many local players. So one of the idea here is that if a U.S. company comes to China, just copy what they have been done in U.S., it may not be that effective anymore. So you have to change your model and your product to cater to China's model, very unique business environment, especially in the internet space, because for internet, China and U.S. start around the same time. For some business model, China even advanced compared with U.S. For example, Tencent, today clearly much better than some of those social network companies in China. You can't say Tencent is learned from Facebook or copycat Facebook. In fact, if you look at Facebook and many others, some of those features are learned from Chinese companies. So if a internet company in U.S. want to go to China, they have to think about whether they have an edge there or not. Secondly, they're going to have to face the competition from local companies, many driven by very, very strong entrepreneurs. So how are you going to be successful? One thing which we suggest is to having a very unique shareholding structures. You should introduce someone as entrepreneur as in your home country. Someone not listen to the head office, but someone able to base his product and service around Chinese unique business environment and leverage the edge from head office. That's how we did it on the LinkedIn joint ventures, and that's why try very hard for Airbnb. The product of LinkedIn and Airbnb are wonderful. There's no question about it. But there are some local competitors. Their CEOs and their founders are very strong. And you need to have a structure where the guy who runs LinkedIn China has a direct interest in running that business. So the management team need to be compensated properly and not just compensated at the head office. And I think that, that's probably the best way for a U.S. company to compete and do well in China. In fact, if a Chinese company comes to Silicon Valley, they should do the same thing, right? If they send something from someone from head office and try to compete with local company here in U.S., I don't think they have a chance. But they have to hire the best talent in Silicon Valley and give them enough economic interest. Let them run the show, and then leverage the back end from China. And then you might have a chance to competing locally. I think it is the model moving forward, applicable for both U.S. companies as well for Chinese companies. So that's how we actually bring LinkedIn to China, and that's how we bring Airbnb to China. And I think this is probably a model that we'll see if that fits for many other U.S. companies, even though they are already very, very successful here US. And as the business partner, what we bring to the table is that we're helping to get the best team, and also to put all resources behind it, and to make sure that you have the right partners for your efforts. And actually, it's not easy to find such so-called local CEOs, because he needs to be very entrepreneurial, as I mentioned. At the same time, he had to understand how to working with a large organizations, because you do want to leverage your head office, some of the existing technology infrastructures, and someone who know how to make sure the respective department within your head office can work with you very closely. So it's difficult to find this type of talent, but it's a tough job, and we have been trying very hard, and so far that we have been quite successful with LinkedIn, and hopefully we can extend it to other U.S. companies.
Definitely want to stay in Airbnbs in China. So we'll now open up to questions from the audience. We have Maria and Neve on either side. Please raise your hand high if you are interested in asking a question so they can spot you. You can also tweet to our hashtag #StanfordGSS if you have a question. And I think we'll start with a question from Twitter.
Great. So thank you both for such an inspirational discussion. Now, the first question from Twitter, many of us here aspire to be entrepreneurs and see China as a great market opportunity. But what are some of the unique challenges that entrepreneurs face in China, and how do you recommend we overcome them?
I think one of the most frequently sort of encountered challenge is competition. It's actually interesting. I always very puzzled, and I still do not have the perfect answer. Here in the U.S., in Silicon Valley, have one business model. Typically, no one either cares to copy, or no one really need to copy. If you have Uber, you have Airbnb, you have LinkedIn, there's very few copycats. In China, as long as your business is doing well, you will definitely have copycats. It's a matter of how to compete more successfully, and that actually gonna putting pressure on the leaders to innovate all the time, right? I remember when I was running C-Trip, one of the my routine job is come to Monday meeting and discuss how our competitor was doing, especially Elon, right? So one of the Monday discussion item is, spending 30 minutes and discuss what's Elon has been launched in the last 1 week. And indeed, I have to say, many of those are copied what C-Trip been doing. Some of those very detailed, like marketing plans, like sending cards at the airport. When we do that, they did that. So what can you do, right? So you just have to innovate all the time just to make sure you stay ahead of the game. And it's a reality, and people have to face. Many business models, you cannot IP it. You just have to, raise more money. You just have to, innovate all the time, and you just have to differentiate yourself well enough. And that differentiation sometimes comes down to very details. When we look at C-Trip versus Elon, at that time, we are around 2 times bigger than Elon. And one of the differentiate we have is through call center, we're providing better services. That's actually become a big edge. And if you're coming down to merchant relationship, when we establish a certain relationship with a hotel group, they follow. That relationship, it's difficult to do exclusive deals. But only thing which we have been done well and differentiate yourself is a better customer services. And you can call that actually a small details, but that small detail really bring very big change. Bring very big gap for C-Trip against Elon. And so for China, if you want to get into those competitive space, you have to be prepared and to innovate all the times. And the other thing I want to point out is that it's difficult to retain talents in Silicon Valley because people gonna strike out on his own. It's even more difficult to do so in China. If you're looking at a turnover rate at the major internet companies in China, it's actually higher, or a lot higher compared with US companies. Many companies feel like, many senior executives feel like, to do startup today, the environment is so good. There's so many people, so much money, chase after them, and they all, and especially in the mobile internet space, the entry barrier to start up something is is relatively lower. So we do see people willing to consider do something on his own instead of staying with a large company. And so I think that's a challenge, that how to retain people. And obviously, compensation is one way, ESOP, etc. But also to build a very strong culture to make sure that your top people could stay.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. I'm Cao Bing, MBA 1. So I'm really curious to see how you can evaluate a company with a trend that is kind of uncertain. So earlier you mentioned that big data is one of the trends. And within big data, there's going to be a lot of different sectors, medicine, education, you name it. Can you maybe walk through us, share some insights on how you would actually have a quantifiable metrics within those big data sectors to determine which one would be potentially successful?
I think there's a few common checking point we will look at when we're looking at any startup. This is the same whether it's consumer internet or whether it's SaaS enterprise. One is obviously the background of the team, whether it actually fit for that type of entrepreneurship. For example, if it's e-commerce, I'll be very eager to know whether he has consumer retail experience, whether he has supply chain experience. But for SaaS enterprises, I will look to see if he has the relevant software experience or enterprises experience before. Secondly, I will also look at the market size. That's actually very, very important. If you look at e-commerce area, the reason why JD become one of the top internet companies in China, because they address the most important area at the very beginning, the 3C, the consumer the consumer electronics. If you start from something else, for example, you focus on books day one, then you may not get as big as you grow. So the total addressable market is always something very, very important, especially in the first 1 to 2 years. You can always expand from your core areas after you become successful. So in the SaaS enterprise area, you have to start from some verticals. And the question is whether that vertical is big enough for you to become a very substantial leader, and you can expand from that. Beyond these 2 points, the other very important, I think, area to look after is whether the timing is right. Because enterprises' demand in China is clearly there, but people have priorities. For particular corporates, they'll look at it, how much money I want to spend on enterprise software, and what are the key sort of area I want to put money this year against a year later or 2 years later. So for enterprise software, you should look at those areas which corporate are having the most pain in increasing efficiency. We look at securities, we look at storage, we look at performance areas, we look at HR areas, some of those areas which clearly, with the rising labor cost, you have to address in those issues. And I think that's probably a important point for venture capitalists as well as for for an entrepreneur who want to start business in that sector.
Thank you, Mr. Shen, for your speech. It's very inspiring. So my question is about people. When you was about to start Ctrip, how did you find your partners? Because without good partners, it's impossible for a startup to be successful. And the same as here, like now, if we want to build up a startup in China, what's the most effective way to find the perfect partners? Thank you.
It's difficult to find perfect partners, but as long as you find good partners, that's okay. When I look at many startups, when they walked into our conference room to present, to be honest, most of the team at the so-called angel stage or series stage do not have a complete team. But you need to have some core team member and addressing the major needs. In the C-Trip days, we have myself and James and Chichi. Frankly, it's a little bit crowded team, right? We got 3 guys already have a lot of experience in different business segments. But even with that 3 people, we decided to find Fanming, who has worked at the travel industry for many years. Because we do realize online travel is about internet, but at the same time, it's about travel. So we want someone who understands the travel industry a lot, about how to build a relationship with hotels, how to position ourselves against all the other traditional travel agencies. So these are very interesting questions that you have to address, and you find someone who can complement your skill set and to addressing those issues. And if you're going to have a so-called core team at first, not a complete team, then try to find what are the most critical component of your startup, like e-commerce. Then you have to better have someone who understands supply chain. If you do not have someone experienced in that segment, you don't even have the business taking off. But maybe someone who do a better job doing online marketing comes second. It's still very important, but it's not the most critical at the day one. So I think you just have to go along with your business ramp up to find a team gradually. Day one to find a complete team is always a challenge.
I think we have time for one last question from the audience.
Hello, hi Neil. Thanks for your time. My question is, which is a bigger bubble, China or Silicon Valley? I actually want to be more specific. So here's a thought experiment. If Uber raises another round right now, and if the latest round investors are guaranteed a 3 times return, would you be an investor? Thanks.
I don't want to comment specifically on the Uber case, but I don't see a so-called a big bubble there, because at the end of the day, you ask yourself, are those startups really creating values? If they do creating values, or most of the startup companies are creating values, I'm not particularly worried. Valuation, there's always up and downs. If you look at the public market, they're always up and downs anyway. And so I would not particularly worry about valuation itself, because the market itself will adjust. The venture capitalists in general are not stupid enough to pay a premium consistently. They might pay premium for a short period of time, but they will adjust themselves. And when you look at the so-called bubble, if most of companies are just creating a lot of so-called users without providing value to users, that's something which I worry. But if you look at Uber and Airbnb, right? I mean, clearly these are the two of the startup company which become very successful. They do creating a lot of values, right? I mean, Uber clearly has provide the most efficient transportation systems for all the people around the world, and Airbnb has created new demands. And something which the hotel industry have never been, thought about. So I think these are either creating new demand or increase efficiency big time. So I think ultimately, the value will be, created by those companies. I'm not particularly worried that if there's any so-called, bubble, because the company might ahead of itself a little bit for valuations. If you look at China, back in 1999, where there's a bunch of companies like C-Trip, like Baidu, it's difficult to comment on the valuation at each stage. But what is important is that they do bring value to the companies, to the whole economy. What I'll be very worried about is when those companies are creating a very same value. I want to use one examples. Back in 2001 and 2002, there's a bunch of companies called SP companies in China. I don't know if you guys still remember. Maybe some of you are not living in China at the time. They're providing either ringtones or pictures for the China Mobile, China Unicom, etc. And most of the company has died or has been sold. And sold itself is not an issue. The issue is when the company is sold, the company almost disappears. It's not like a YouTube or Instagram. They're there and they're providing value to users. Why those companies disappeared? At one point, they're very, very profitable because they charge a part of the, they charge user fees through China Mobile and China Unicom. And it could be very, very profitable because the value creating is just so thin. People do not need that middleman. China Mobile can do it themselves after they figure it out. So that's why I was worried, that's the real bubble. If you talk about the bubble in the last 10, 15 years in China, those SP company as a whole is a bubble. And if we can avoid that, I think the overall startup environment is reasonably healthy.
Great. Well, before we end, Neil, one last question. So as a really successful entrepreneur yourself and now being the entrepreneur behind entrepreneurs, what advice would you have for aspiring entrepreneurs here in the audience as they look to build something new?
I think, you have to go with your heart. It's difficult to make a perfect choice. And at least in my cases, that each time when I make a choice, I say, one, whether this go with a big trend. Secondly, probably more important, which is something you really like it to do, right? When I, was working at a Deutsche Bank in the last, a year or so in 1999, I really was excited by, the internet development in China. I really want to do something. If I'm not going to do C-chip, I will do something else. But C-chip itself fits me well because I love travel. At the same time, I think the internet can change, people's life in China. So you have to really love what you do. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to sustain. If you just think this is just a big trend, but that's something which you don't like or you don't know whether you like it or not, then if you work there for 6 months and 12 months, you'll probably feel like, oh, I want to jump to the next trend. I do notice there are some entrepreneurs like that. I was, we had this Monday meeting, and then, when some entrepreneur come to visit and ask him, so why you want to do this entrepreneurship? Oh, B2B is hot, or big data is hot. But the question fundamentally is, do you think you are the best fit for this? And do you really have passion for that? And that's, a question you should ask yourself. And no matter what other people's interest, you should find your interest and follow your heart and find the stuff you are passionate about it and do it.
All right. Thank you so much, Neil. Real pleasure having you here.
记得点赞关注哦。